So our topic today is weed and crop interactions in agricultural systems. But our focus will be crop weed competition. The aim of this lecture is to understand how weeds affect crop growth and reduce crop yields. This information could be useful for planning weed control programs for maximizing crop yields. The most important question is, how do weeds cause crop yield losses? We must understand that crops and weeds share the same environment where they obtain water, nutrients, light, oxygen, carbon dioxide, as well as the space for their growth and survival. Weeds generally adversely affect crop growth, leading to reduce the crop yields. It must be noted that some crop genotypes have also the ability to suppress the growth of weeds. This slide is showing a maize crop which is infested with the blackjack, and the two are growing together in the same field, maize as well as the weed, blackjack. We want to understand how weeds actually reduce crop yields. For insects, for insect pests, it can easily be observed that insects can actually cause damage, physical damage to a crop, and you can associate that damage with the insects. But with weeds, sometimes it's difficult to understand how they reduce crop yields. This is a soybean crop in a weedy environment. You can see these lines of soybean, and there are a lot of weeds. So the important weed crop interactions are four. Number one, we have got a competition, which is the subject matter today. Then there is allelopathy, which we will talk about in detail later. But I want to say that sometimes it's difficult to separate in the field, competition and allelopathy. So sometimes we just talk of interference or weed interference in crops. Then there's also parasitism, which we will talk about. Now, we want to define competition. What is it? It is the process where plants in a mixture access limited resources namely nutrients, light, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and space in the environment. And this results in reduced growth of one of the plant or both plants in the mixture. So you have the crop and the weed in the same environment, trying to utilize nutrients, light, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and space. And these resources may not be sufficient for both crops. And one of the plants may actually suffer. This is a groundnut crop with weeds. You can hardly see the groundnut crop, but it's there. This maize is showing nutrient deficiency symptoms. Probably this is phosphorus, and you can see a lot of weeds in this field. Again, nutrient deficiency symptoms. We were having maize which is seriously affected by weeds. You can see the purplish leaves of the maize crop may be indicating the phosphorus deficiency. Probably this has been caused by weeds. Again, on this slide, you see a crop which is seriously affected by weeds. This is in a field where we have soybean, which has also been affected by weeds. This whole area is infested with weeds. In the soybean crop, actually in this field, they tried to spray some herbicides, but it was a bit late. So the herbicide could hardly kill the weeds because it was applied at the wrong stage. Here we've got a crop of maize. Here you can see this patch which was affected by cynodon dactylon. You can see that the maize height has been reduced. This is due to weed crop competition, but probably this is a good example of interference, where you have competition plus aridopathy affecting the crop. Here we've got maize, which is infested with weeds. This place is Nyanyadzi irrigation scheme. In Manicaland. You can see the maize crop, which has been affected by the weeds. Again, here we've got a crop of maize with weeds. So our focus today is to try and understand how these weeds actually reduce yields in a maize, for example, in a maize crop. Now, aridopathy is part of interference, because in the field we may not separate competition from the effects of allelopathy. It's quite difficult to do so. So allelopathy is defined as a process where you find weeds and crops producing harmful substances, which we call allelochemicals. These are produced through the leaves or roots. Once they are in the environment, they can adversely affect the growth of either the weeds or the crops. So the term interference is actually a combination of competition and allelopathy. This could be the real situation under field conditions. Although we do have a lot of studies under weed competition, which are frequently reported in literature, probably these studies are referring to interference studies. There's also what we call commensalism, which is a relationship between unrelated organisms in which one gets benefits from the other without harming it. Now, where we have weeds and crops, this kind of relationship is rare. So we're not going to spend much time on it, but we need to know that such a relationship exists between organisms. We also have parasitism. This is a situation where a plant depends on another plant for its carbon and nutrient requirements. Now, you have got a plant which is physically connected to another plant through a structure which is known as the hostorium, which makes it possible for the parasite to abstract carbon and nutrients. This usually results in reducing biomass of the host, so the host is adversely affected. Here I've got an example of a parasitic weed. This one is Striga asiatica, which is found in maize. It has red flowers. So I want to zero in on plant competition. We've got two things here. We have got above ground or aerial competition, where the competition is specifically for light and carbon dioxide. We also have below ground competition or subterranean competition, where plants compete for water, nutrients, and oxygen. Now we have got forms of competition. First, we have got what we call intra-specific competition, where you have the same plant species competing with each other. For example, maize competing with maize. Then we have got interspecific competition. Here we have got different species, which could be a crop and a weed. So there are two forms of competition: intraspecific competition and interspecific competition. Now, what do plants compete for? First, they can compete for light. So the plant characteristics which are important for this sort of competition are as follows. We have a high growth rate resulting in tall plants. We have got plants with a high leaf area index. The leaf angle and arrangement is important. For example, we can have horizontal versus angled leaves. If it is horizontal, it can effectively shade other plants. If it is angled leaves, sometimes they can allow the passage of light. But when we talk of light competition, it's actually the whole canopy structure, which is important. Here I've got a slide which is showing maize and shamba grass. You can see this is a lot of shamba. This is maize. So the shamba grass is competing with a maize for light. You can see the background here, it is quite dark here. Light is coming through this angle. And some of the maize leaves are in the shade. Of course, as well as the shamba grass as well. You can see it may be quite dark within the crop. These plants are competing for light. Carbon dioxide. Probably the question is, do plants actually compete for carbon dioxide? Because it appears we have got plenty of it in the atmosphere. Probably it is important to note that there are three groups of plants which can utilize carbon dioxide through different processes. Let us start with the C3 plants. C3 plants use rubisco. This is an enzyme which facilitates fixation of carbon dioxide so that it can produce starch. Sorry. Hello? Hello?
Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
Can you please let me in?
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Somebody's trying to get in. I have to stop sharing so that I admit you here.
Okay, Doc.
We have to wait. Yes. You are in. By the way, I'm recording this, so you will have some interruptions. Okay, let us continue. I was now talking about carbon dioxide, and I said we do have plenty of it in the atmosphere. So can we say plants compete for carbon dioxide? There are three groups of plants. We've got the C3 plants, the C4 plants, and the CAM plants. These three groups of plants fix carbon dioxide differently. Probably I will explain later. Yeah, I am teaching. Okay. So we have got C3 plants which use an enzyme called Rubisco. In fact, Rubisco is used by all three groups of plants to fix carbon dioxide. So under C3, we've got soybean, cotton, wheat, and groundnuts. Under C4 plants, we have got these weeds: Amaranthus, Hybridus, Cynodon and Cyperus esculendus. These are more competitive than C3 plants. Then we have got the CAM plants. Actually, the C4 plants and the CAM plants use what is called the PEP to facilitate the fixation of carbon dioxide. I will explain that later. So the Rubisco is required, which is an enzyme to fix carbon dioxide. The CAM plants, we have Puchulaka oriracea, Feten or Chifantichimuka, which is a weed in the CAM plants. Probably you might be aware that the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is actually increasing. This is the data from 1960 measurements up to 2020. by a certain organization. These are parts per million of carbon dioxide. The trend is that our atmosphere is carrying more and more of the carbon dioxide. And we know carbon dioxide is required by plants for photosynthesis. Now, this may influence the competition for carbon dioxide in the long run. So we can say probably as far as carbon dioxide is concerned, there is no direct competition. As I have indicated, I have said that the three groups of plants, C3, C4, and the CAM plants or the crassulacean acid metabolism plants, fix carbon dioxide differently. And of course, here I've got the examples of C3, C4, and the CAM plants, which I have already stated. Let us just talk about the C3 plants and try to see what is likely to happen. Under what conditions can there be competition for carbon dioxide? Now, suppose there is plenty of sunlight and the temperatures are high. This could speed up the process of photosynthesis. And we know that photosynthesis actually produces oxygen. So we have an accumulation of oxygen in the mesophyll layer of leaves. But that is also where we find carbon dioxide. Now there will be more of oxygen than carbon dioxide. So the ratio of carbon dioxide divided by oxygen will be decreased. Now, once that has been decreased, it will trigger a certain process which is similar to respiration, and it is called the photorespiration. The disadvantage of photorespiration is that whereas photosynthesis could be making carbohydrates, photorespiration will utilize some of those carbohydrates as if the plant is carrying out respiration. So photorespiration will start to reduce the glucose which is required by the plant. Probably you may want to know that we've got a substance known as ribulose 1,5-biphosphate, which has to combine with a carbon dioxide. But in the presence of oxygen, it can also react with oxygen. This is how glucose production is actually affected. And we know the importance of glucose. Once we limit glucose in a plant, it means that that plant growth is going to be reduced. And the plant growth is one of the important factors of competition. Once you have reduced growth, it means that plant is no longer competitive. It will lose its competitive ability. So, in a summary, we can say sea plants are not very competitive because they can support photorespiration, which reduces their growth. Probably that is the message. Now, whereas in C4 plants, the C4 plants have actually escaped photorespiration, or the problem of photorespiration has actually been resolved in the C4 plants. Now, in a C4 plant, there's a separation where you have carbon dioxide being fixed. It is now occurring in vascular bundles. And there's a clear separation where oxygen is going to exist. Let's say we have got plenty of sunshine and we have got high photosynthetic rates. Although there is production of oxygen, it is kept away from carbon dioxide. Because carbon dioxide is now occurring in the vascular bundles. Basically, what happens is that there's a substance known as PEP, which will pick carbon dioxide from the zones of oxygen. And the PEP will transfer oxygen, carbon dioxide to the vascular bundles. In the vascular bundles, it is released. Then it combines with ribulose 1,5-bisphosphate. That is how carbon dioxide is actually fixed. Now there will be enough glucose, there will be plenty of energy, which will facilitate high growth rates, which are a characteristic of the C4 plants. So the C4 plants are able to maintain their high growth rates because they've solved the problem of photorespiration. Now, this problem of photorespiration has also been solved in the CAM plants. Now, how the CAM plants survive is that they close the stomata during the day and open the stomata during the night. So during the night, they get in their carbon dioxide, which is also picked by PEP. But this time around, the carbon dioxide is now stored in the vacuole, probably as mallet. So during the night, carbon dioxide goes to the vacuoles via PEP and is stored as mallet. During the day, instead of getting the carbon dioxide via the stomata, the plant will release carbon dioxide from within it, from the vacuoles. And this carbon dioxide will now be fixed to form glucose. And the growth rates will be maintained and these plants will be able to compete. And I've given you an example of cam plants, which is a weed known as the Portulaca oleracea, which is found maybe where there's a lot of irrigation. So as far as carbon dioxide is concerned, it depends whether the plant is C3, C4, or a cam plant. As we have noted, it is the C3 plants which are limited in terms of carbon dioxide. But what we don't know is that as this carbon dioxide is increasing in the atmosphere, can we say that probably in future there won't be competition for carbon dioxide? As we have said, carbon dioxide is increasing in the atmosphere. So probably in future, the C3 plants won't suffer much. Probably our crops will become competitive. Now, plants can also compete for nutrients. The major nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Actually, for your own information, most of our soils in Zimbabwe show deficiency. Hello?
Leviticus, may you please mute your video so that we cannot see what is on your background? Embure. Mute the video so that we cannot see what is in the background.
Yes,
Okay now. Okay now.
Yeah, okay. So I was saying that in our Zimbabwean soils, the major nutrients for crops are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And these, probably with the exception of potassium, nitrogen and phosphorus are limited. So in most cases, crops and weeds have to compete for these two key nutrients. And sometimes we see nutrient deficient symptoms expressed in weedy plots or in areas where weeding has not been done. For example, we can see yellowing of leaves on crops indicating nitrogen deficient symptoms. We may also see purplish leaves, which is an indication of phosphorus deficiency. This slide is showing nutrient deficient symptoms. Probably you can see there are purplish leaves, which is an indication that phosphorus is now limiting. It is limiting probably because of the presence of these weeds, such as Tagetes minuta. They could be Biden, they could be Acanthospema mispidum. So what is competition? or crop competition. In summary, we can use this slide, where on our left we have got this crop, and on our right we have got the weed, which is red. What we call above ground competition, it could be the light and the carbon dioxide which are competed for. Above ground competition. Below ground competition, probably the crop and the weeds are now competing for nutrients, NPK, plus water. Yeah, I have stopped that presentation for a while.